Aloha bakers, welcome back to my Bake Escape. I recently took a trip to Maui, Hawaii and had the best time. We really got out into nature, went for hikes and swam a lot, and we also ate a lot. Maui has amazing food. The fruit is super sweet and delicious, and a lot of their bakery items and breakfast items are packed full of coconut, pineapple, and macadamia nuts. So this really inspired me to create a recipe that kind of just puts all of my experience in Maui into one delicious baked good. We had a great little coffee shop in our hotel, and one morning I decided to try a mango macadamia nut bread, and I was a little disappointed. It didn't really have any mango in it, and it barely had any macadamia nuts. So this inspired me to recreate or make something that has a lot of flavor, lots of pineapple, lots of coconut, and lots of macadamia nuts. So what I made is a pineapple coconut macadamia nut bread. For the full recipe, please visit mybakeescape.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok and Pinterest at mybakeescape. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. All right, let's get started. The first ingredient that you will need for this bread is pineapple. You can use fresh like I did here, or you can use canned. The next ingredient is coconut, and we're going to use it in 3 ways. We're going to use coconut oil, coconut cream, and then we're going to use some toasted flaked coconut later on. It's been pretty warm here in California where I live, so my coconut oil was already liquid, but if it's not liquid, you can warm it up a little bit to get it to liquid form. If I have any leftover ingredients, I like to store them to use in other recipes. When I store leftovers like this, I label the container and I also add the date. That way I know how old the item is and if it's still okay to use in recipes. I use a food scale to measure out my ingredients. I highly recommend investing in one. They're not very expensive. I have a link in the description of this video to the one that I purchased on Amazon. You'll also notice in my recipes, I give the cup measurement as well as the grams. Every time I bake, especially when trying a new recipe, I like to measure out every ingredient ahead of time. This helps make the process a lot smoother and enjoyable when I'm organized like this. So I highly suggest that you take time to pre-measure all of your ingredients before starting your recipe. I also use a fine grained salt in my baked goods. And the third element to this recipe are the macadamia nuts. I'm using dry roasted salted macadamia nuts I brought from Hawaii. Now that I've measured out all of my ingredients, I'm going to start making my recipe. So I start by combining the flour with the baking powder, salt, mix that together. Next step is to work on the wet ingredients, combining the granulated sugar with the coconut oil. Using my hand mixer, I cream these together for about 2 to 3 minutes until the sugar and oil are fluffy and mixed together. Then I add vanilla extract, followed by the coconut cream. Next up is to add the eggs. We're using 2 whole eggs for this recipe. Now it's time to incorporate the flour into the oil egg mixture. So I like to do this in 2 batches, mixing just until the flour is incorporated. So you're going to add this to the bread batter and then work on the pineapple. Then you're going to fold the macadamia nuts and pineapple into the batter. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees. While the oven is preheating, it's time to prep the loaf pan. I decided to add a base similar to that of a pineapple upside down cake. It's brown sugar, vanilla, salt, and some melted butter. And this also reminded me of wet sand, so I thought a good way to tie in the, sand ocean to this recipe. So spray your pan with non-stick cooking spray. I'm using a 9x5 loaf pan. Press that layer of brown sugar down into the pan and then pour the batter on top of that. This loaf is going to bake for about 45 to 55 minutes. It really just depends on the humidity and the temperature of your oven. I like to level this out as much as possible. Place in the oven and bake at 350 I start at 45 minutes and check every 2 minutes after the 45-minute mark just to make sure that it doesn't overbake. And as you can imagine, a lot of dishes pile up when I make these recipes. So this is a great time to kind of clean up, reset, and get ready to finish this recipe when the bread has finished baking. With 3 minutes left on the clock, I decided to check, and it's not done. I could tell because when I press, it still jiggles a little bit, so I think I baked this for another 5 to 7 minutes. Once the bread is done baking, go ahead and remove it from the oven and place on a cooling rack. I like to use a bamboo skewer to check to see that it is done. So when you poke it, you want to see very light crumbs. You don't want to see any wet batter. A bamboo skewer is a great way to test if your bread is done. Then I gently take a butter knife and run it around the edges. This will help release the loaf from the pan. And unfortunately, some of the bread stuck to the bottom. So if you do make this recipe, I highly recommend you use a parchment or foil sling. So you would line the pan with a little bit of parchment paper, and that'll help release the bread. While the bread cools, we're going to make the delicious icing. I combined powdered sugar with vanilla and salt. And what I'm using is a Malibu coconut rum. I had some left over from a cake that I made for a friend, so I decided to make this icing with that, but you can use coconut milk, water, or even regular milk. You want to add enough liquid until you reach a drizzle consistency. It'll take a little bit of work to get there, but eventually you'll see that you'll get this delicious, smooth, drizzly icing. Once the loaf has cooled, you can chop up a little bit more of the macadamia nuts. I really like to top my loaves with the ingredients that I use inside. So if somebody has a piece of this bread, they're going to know that it has nuts and it has coconut in there. So I have some toasted coconut flakes, my macadamia nuts there, and now I am going to ice this loaf. You can add as little or as much as you'd like. I prefer a nice thick layer of this icing. It adds another level of coconut flavor and sweetness. It turned out really good. You want to make sure that the loaf is completely cooled, because if it's still warm, this icing will just melt right off of it. Next step is to top the icing with some macadamia nuts and toasted coconut and allow it to set for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then you can enjoy. This bread turned out incredible. It's super moist on the inside. There's chunks of pineapple and big pieces of macadamia nut throughout. It turned out better than I could have expected. That layer of caramelized brown sugar at the bottom adds another level of deliciousness. You definitely are going to want to make this very soon. If you do try this recipe, please leave a comment. I'd love to know what you think. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and do that now. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching, and have a sweet day.